Most investors spend years trying to build a rental portfolio, but despite what you might think, you can get over 12 new properties in less than a year, and that's with no gimmicks, no inheritance, and no full-time job. It is literally just strategy and creative deal structure. So we're going to jump into this, guys, but first I need you to understand when I started in real estate, I did not have endless access to capital. I actually thought that the only way that you could purchase investment properties was you have to get an investment loan, and then two, you'd have to put down a 25% down payment. And guys, I didn't even know simple basic strategies like house hacking, or say you get a duplex and you rent out one side. And I definitely didn't know anything, or really absolutely anything, about creative finance. So guys, if I can do it, trust me, you can do it. To give you an idea of what my time horizon looked like, so I started investing back in 2020, and my first 4 properties, I purchased those in the first 3 years of my investing career, and I thought that was crazy fast. I was looking at it, was like, okay, I'm purchasing at least 1 property a year. That's freaking awesome, but that's super slow. That's actually extremely slow, because when I learned creative finance and the strategy we're going to discuss, I purchased my next 5 properties in less than a year. You know what? That is still slow compared to most of my friends in real estate, because at a certain point, guys, this is really more of a mindset thing than it is anything else. Once you can get past that mindset, you have a little bit of the knowledge, this is feasible. Because if you want to purchase 12 houses in the next 12 months, you most definitely can. And you can do it without putting any of your own money down up front. And I'm going to show you exactly how. All right, so this method we're going to talk about, it is called the stack method, because really all you're doing in this instance is you are stacking loans. And this is going to make sense here shortly. Now, this is also known as a seller carryback structure or a Morby method. Again, it goes by many names, but really all you're doing is you're going in with a loan, then you're having a third party bring the down payment for that loan, and then you're having the seller carry back a portion of their equity that is going to pay back that third party. So you're in essence getting into the deal with no money out of pocket, and in some instances you're actually getting paid to purchase that real estate. So to give you a quick example, we're going to go with super easy numbers, very high level, and then we're going to go into more of like a deep dive illustration on a real deal we're working on right now. For example purposes, keep it super simple. We've got a 100K house. Now with this, the stack method is always going to come in 2 legs of a transaction. So the first leg, you're going to have this straight line here, and say you're going to have that loan. You have a typical loan that you're bringing in. So say you bring in a loan for 70K. Say that loan's a DSCR. We'll get into that in a minute. So DSCR. Then you're going to have, again, that third party. So it's transactional funding or transactional private money lender. Again, that's what my operation does. We work with these type of structures. So I'll put TF for short, transactional funding, and they're going to bring in that remaining 30,000 to make up that full 100K. So what happens here is the seller, and again, we're not accounting for like closing costs and stuff like that. We'll go over that a little more in the next, like, really full scope of this transaction. But to make it easy, seller, they're receiving the full 100K purchase price. And then they're going around and turning to the second leg of this transaction. And what they're doing there is they're taking a portion of that money, in this case 30K, and they're going to create a seller carry note and secure it against the property as a second lien position. And that seller carry note is going to, again, be for that $30,000 here. Now the buyer is going to take what they're getting back from that seller carry, that 30K, and they're going to pay off that transactional funder. That way they're in the deal with no money out of their pocket. Now this is super high level. Obviously there's much more involved with this, but hopefully that kind of simplifies the structure for you before we get into this a little more detailed like illustration of a deal we're currently working on. Now going through the deal that we're actually working on right now, that we're currently working through, I'm going to draw your institution here. So you've got your institution. That's what's going to be bringing in typically your DSCR. So a DSCR is a debt service coverage ratio loan. And it's a loan where, as an investor, you're using it because you can qualify for that loan based off of the performance of the property. It doesn't go against your credit. So it's something that's called a non-recourse loan, or a form of a non-recourse. So we've got you as the buyer here, the investor. So we'll put B for buyer. And then you've got that institutional loan coming in. And then you've got the down payment. And again, this down payment is coming from someone like my operation, the transactional funding business. So you're going to go out once you're qualified, and you are going to find the house that you're looking to purchase. Now, again, in this house, the one we're working on right now, and we got the seller here, the purchase price for this house that we're working on right now is 140K. Now, within the purchase and sale agreement here, it's called PSA. Really, all this is just instructions to where you hand it off to a title company. They know how to conduct that transaction, what needs to go where as far as funds to close that transaction for you. So that's what's happening majority in the escrow process. This is also where you get your inspections done, you get your appraisal done, or the bank gets their appraisal just to see how much they're actually going to loan to you, stuff like that. So that is a crucial part of this as well. And then you're going to have your close of escrow. So in this transaction that we're working on, it's 140K purchase price. The DSCR lender for the buyer, they got a 75% LTV. So they're bringing 75% of this purchase price, and it actually appraised for much higher than this. We kind of knew that ahead of the time because the buyer had got a pre-appraisal on it and it appraised substantially higher. So 105K at a 75% LTV. And then from a transactional funding perspective, we are bringing 35K to cover or satisfy that down payment for this buyer. Now the seller, that kind of takes care of your first transaction, although we actually have to factor in, obviously. So this seller has an underlying loan on their property, which is typical. Some of them, where this works really well is if they own it completely outright, because there's a lot of ways you can shift the numbers on this, but we do have a lot where they do have an underlying loan. So 75K underlying loan that this seller has to pay off. And then closing costs on this is actually direct to seller. So it's relatively cheap in closing costs, about $2,800. So that's about 2% of the purchase price. So typically when you're talking about closing costs, it usually ranges from anywhere from 3 to 9%, depending on like if you have commission structures in there, like realtors you have to pay, stuff like that, or wholesalers. So this one's direct to seller, so it's actually relatively cheap. So 2,800 is for that. So what we're doing is we're funding this down payment as well as the closing costs, because we fund anything that the DSCR lender does not bring to the table in this transaction. Now, what the seller is doing on the second leg is they are doing a seller carry note for $64,000. So that's the seller carry note here, and they're creating that note. And out of that note, that is coming back and paying us off as a transaction funder. So again, these closing costs, the down payment plus our fees, that's $41,800. And then the remainder is going back to the buyer on this. So after you pay off the underlying loan, again, the seller carries 64K, it's around 22K that is going back to the buyer. Now, this is actually kind of a unique scenario where the buyer is the son to the seller, so it's the mom, and he's just trying to help her out of a bind. So a lot of this money coming back, they're actually going to split that. So that it's kind of an interesting one where how that one's going to work. But guys, this is pretty awesome because this applies to multiple other transactions where it's not a related party. That we've come in and either you get into the property with no money out of pocket, or you're actually getting paid to purchase that real estate. It is a killer strategy. This is awesome. This, my friends, is how you scale in real estate. Now, one thing, obviously in real estate, there's always risks. You need to understand what are the risks associated with this. Now, one major item is if you're not an experienced investor, you probably don't want to do this. And I'm going to tell you why. You don't want to do this because if you don't know how to underwrite these properties properly, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot big time. And the reason why is, say, if you're not accounting for your capital expenditures, your repairs and maintenance, your vacancy costs, your property management costs, a lot of items that beginner investors completely forget about. They think that there's just a spread between what your mortgage payment is and what your rent is, and that's what their cash flow is. That's not what your cash flow is. It's much different. So you could get into this transaction and be losing money and say, oh man, I got to sell this. I'm like losing money on this. Well, what adds insult to injury is in these type of transaction, you are actually over leveraging the property. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So you've got your DSCR here for 105, and then you've got your seller carry for 64K. So those are two loans that you now have on the property. That adds up to 169,000. So what that equates to is you do 169,000 of loans you have on that property, subtract the purchase price that you had. Technically, you're over leveraged at that purchase price by about $29,000. So if you decide down the line that, hey, this is not cash flowing how I had expected, and you have to go to sell it, you're going to be paying almost 30 grand, well, 30 grand plus, because you have to account for closing costs. You're going to be paying that amount that you over leveraged to sell that house. That's not a good situation to be in. This is not an appreciation play up front. This is one where you need to make sure that it cash flow, it makes sense. But guys, if it cash flows, this is awesome because it's really infinite cash flow because you're not putting any money into the deal. This is awesome. Again, this is how you scale. You can very easily get to that 12 properties in a year, probably even more than that. It is like, this strategy is awesome. Now, the other thing you've got to consider in this transaction, guys, is the DSCR lender. So you need to be transparent with these DSCR lenders because this is not a typical type of transaction. You don't want to be putting yourself in hot water. Now, we do have a lot of DSCR lenders that we've worked with in the past, and they understand our funding criteria, our party to the, like how we're involved in the transaction, exactly like what's going on in the transaction. So we're very transparent with them. So that's an important part. Also, this is a super complex transaction. So if it's your first time, I would highly recommend going with someone that actually knows what they're doing. We actually offer a service where you could pretty much get an LOI. So it's called letter of intent. Really, if it's detailing what this purchase is going to look like, what that seller carryback terms are going to look like as far as payments, so on and so forth, what's the underlying loan that's being paid off. Doesn't even have to be signed, but as long as it's agreed upon between you and the seller, you can submit that to our website, and then we'll link you up with our TC team. They'll write up the purchase and sell agreement, get you connected with a DSCR lender if you don't have one, and we'll quarterback the entire transaction and make sure that this is done appropriately and where the borrower is protected as well as the seller is protected. So guys, with that, if you're an experienced investor, what are you waiting for? Literally, you do not have to go the slow route like I did. I don't go through that pain. You can scale at a much more rapid pace. And with that, I hope this was helpful for you. If you liked it and you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button. That would help me out a ton. And other than that, if you want to use our funding service, you can check that out. The website is in the description below. And with that, I will catch you on the next one. See ya.